The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of Ashford Palace as Duchess Eleanor Margaret Ashford sat at her mahogany desk, staring at the small white stick in her trembling hands. Two pink lines stared back at her, clear as day. After 3 years of marriage to Duke William Ashford, she was finally pregnant. Eleanor set the test down carefully and pressed her hands against her flat stomach. At 28 years old, she had always dreamed of this moment, but now that it was here, fear mixed with joy in her chest. The Duchy of Ashford had been waiting for an heir since she married William. The pressure from the royal court, the media, and even her own mother-in-law had been constant and suffocating. She walked to the window, overlooking the palace gardens where groundskeepers were tending to the rose bushes. Everything looked the same as it had yesterday, but everything had changed. In about 8 months, there would be a baby in these halls. A tiny person who would one day inherit all of this responsibility. Eleanor heard footsteps in the hallway outside her private study. She quickly slipped the pregnancy test into her desk drawer and smoothed her cream-colored dress. The door opened, and her lady-in-waiting, Margaret Foster, entered with a silver tray of tea and biscuits. "Good morning, Your Grace," Margaret said with a warm smile. She had been Eleanor's closest friend since childhood, long before Eleanor married into royalty. "You look rather pale this morning. Are you feeling well?" Eleanor forced a smile and accepted the teacup with steady hands. "Just a bit tired, Margaret. I didn't sleep well last night." Margaret studied her friend's face with concern. She had known Eleanor for over 20 years and could read her expressions like a book. Something was different today, but she didn't press the matter. "Perhaps you should rest before the charity luncheon this afternoon. Lady Pemberton can be quite exhausting with all her questions about the hospital fundraiser." The mention of the charity event made Eleanor's stomach flutter with nervousness. She would have to sit through a 3-hour luncheon, smiling and making polite conversation while keeping the biggest secret of her life. The thought of food also made her feel slightly queasy, which she now realized might not have been from nerves about the event. After Margaret left, Eleanor pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found Dr. Sarah Chun, her personal physician. Dr. Chun had been treating the royal family for 15 years and was known for her discretion. Eleanor knew she could trust her completely. "Dr. Chen's office, this is Rebecca speaking," came the cheerful voice on the other end. "Hello, this is the Duchess of Ashford. I need to schedule an urgent appointment with Dr. Chun, please. Something completely private." "Of course, Your Grace. Dr. Chen has an opening at 4:30 this afternoon. Would that work for your schedule?" Eleanor checked her calendar. The charity luncheon would end around 3 o'clock, giving her just enough time to make it to the medical center without raising suspicion. "That would be perfect, thank you." The morning dragged on slowly as Eleanor tried to focus on her regular duties. She reviewed documents for the children's literacy program she sponsored, signed letters to various charitable organizations, and met with her secretary about upcoming royal engagements. But her mind kept wandering to the pregnancy test hidden in her desk drawer. During a quiet moment, she researched pregnancy symptoms on her laptop. The nausea she had been feeling for the past week suddenly made perfect sense. The exhaustion she had attributed to stress from royal duties. Even her heightened sense of smell, which had made her morning coffee seem unbearable lately. As she prepared for the charity luncheon, Eleanor chose a flowing navy blue dress that was elegant, but not too fitted. Looking in the mirror, she placed her hand over her stomach again. Soon, she would start showing. Soon, everyone would know their secret. The drive to the Pemberton estate took 30 minutes through the countryside. Eleanor sat in the back of her official car, watching the rolling green hills pass by the window. Her security detail followed in a separate vehicle, maintaining the careful distance they always kept during her public appearances. Lady Pemberton greeted her at the front door with enthusiasm that bordered on overwhelming. "Your Grace, how wonderful to see you. You look absolutely radiant today." Eleanor smiled graciously and allowed herself to be led into the grand dining room where 20 other ladies from prominent families had gathered. The conversation flowed around topics of fashion, upcoming social events, and, of course, the hospital fundraiser that was the purpose of today's gathering. "Tell me, Your Grace, Lady Pemberton said during the main course. How are you, and the Duke's settling into married life? Any exciting news on the horizon? The question was asked with a knowing smile that made Eleanor's cheeks flush. William and I are very happy, Eleanor replied diplomatically. We're focused on our duties to the Duchy and the various charitable causes we support. Mrs. Victoria Hathaway, the wife of a prominent businessman, leaned forward with interest. Of course, but surely you must be thinking about expanding the family? The people of Ashford would be so delighted to hear news of an heir. Eleanor felt her appetite disappear completely. She took a small sip of water and smiled politely. When the time is right, I'm sure any news will be shared appropriately. The conversation continued around her, but Eleanor found it difficult to concentrate. Every mention of family or children made her more aware of the secret she was carrying. She managed to make it through the dessert course and the presentation about the fundraiser without revealing anything, but the effort was exhausting. On the drive to Dr. Chen's office, Eleanor finally allowed herself to relax slightly. The medical center was located in a discreet building away from the main hospital, where members of the royal family could receive treatment without attracting attention from the media or curious onlookers. Dr. Chen greeted her personally in the private entrance. She was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a calm demeanor that immediately put Eleanor at ease. Your Grace, please come in. Rebecca mentioned this was urgent but confidential. Eleanor followed her into the pristine examination room and took a deep breath. Dr. Chen, I believe I might be pregnant. I took a home test this morning and it was positive, but I need to be absolutely certain before I tell William or anyone else. Dr. Chen nodded with understanding. Of course. Let's run a blood test to confirm, and we can also do an ultrasound if you'd like. How long do you think you might be pregnant? I'm not entirely sure. My last period was about 6 weeks ago, maybe 7. The blood test was quick and painless, and while they waited for the results, Dr. Chen prepared the ultrasound machine. Eleanor lay back on the examination table, her heart beating rapidly with anticipation and nervousness. Let's take a look, Dr. Chen said gently as she applied the cool gel to Eleanor's abdomen and began moving the ultrasound wand. The screen remained black and unclear for several long moments before a small, flickering spot appeared. There, Dr. Chen said with a smile, pointing to the screen. There's your baby, and there's the heartbeat. Eleanor stared at the screen in wonder. The tiny flickering movement was so small, but it represented a completely new life growing inside her. Tears formed in her eyes as the reality of the situation truly hit her for the first time. Based on the measurements, I'd estimate you're about 6.5 weeks along, Dr. Chen continued. The baby appears to be developing normally, and the heartbeat is strong. Congratulations, Your Grace. The blood test results confirmed what they could already see on the ultrasound. Eleanor was indeed pregnant, and according to Dr. Chen's calculations, the baby would be due in early March, about 8 months away. What do I need to know about taking care of myself during the pregnancy? Eleanor asked, accepting the ultrasound photos Dr. Chen printed for her. The usual recommendations apply. Take prenatal vitamins, avoid alcohol and caffeine, eat healthy foods, and get plenty of rest. Given your public duties, we'll need to be careful about managing your schedule as the pregnancy progresses. Morning sickness typically peaks around 8 to 10 weeks and then improves, but every woman is different. Eleanor nodded, absorbing all the information. When should I tell my husband? And when will we need to make a public announcement? I'd recommend telling the Duke as soon as possible, especially since you'll want his support during the early weeks when you might be feeling unwell. As for public announcement, many couples wait until the end of the first trimester, around 12 weeks, when the risk of miscarriage decreases significantly. On the drive back to Ashford Palace, Eleanor clutched the ultrasound photos in her purse and tried to imagine how William would react to the news. They had talked about having children many times, but the reality would be different from their discussions. Their lives were about to change in ways they couldn't even imagine. The palace came into view as the sun was beginning to set, casting a golden glow over the ancient stone walls. Eleanor thought about all the children who had grown up within those walls over the centuries, future dukes and duchesses who had played in the gardens and learned their lessons in the same rooms where she now lived. As her car pulled through the main gates, Eleanor made a decision. Tonight, after dinner, she would tell William about the baby. She would show him the ultrasound photos, and together they would begin planning for the newest member of the Ashford family. The thought both thrilled and terrified her, but she knew that keeping the secret any longer would only make her more anxious. William was waiting for her in their private sitting room when she returned to the palace. He looked up from the book he was reading and smiled warmly. How was the charity luncheon? Did Lady Pemberton manage to raise a substantial amount for the hospital? Eleanor set down her purse and walked over to sit beside him on the comfortable sofa. The luncheon went well, though Lady Pemberton asked some rather personal questions about our future plans. William raised an eyebrow. What sort of personal questions? Eleanor took a deep breath and looked into her husband's kind brown eyes. Questions about whether we might be expanding our family soon. Ah, William said with understanding. The inevitable royal succession questions. I hope you told her it was none of her business. Actually, Eleanor said, her voice barely above a whisper, I think she might get her answer sooner than expected. William set down his book and turned to face her fully, sensing the importance of what she was about to say. Eleanor reached into her purse and pulled out the ultrasound photos, her hands shaking slightly as she handed them to him. William, she said softly, we're going to have a baby. William stared at the ultrasound photos in his hands for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Eleanor watched his face carefully, trying to interpret his silence. Finally, he looked up at her with tears glistening in his eyes and a smile spreading across his face. Really? We're really going to have a baby? His voice was filled with wonder and disbelief. Eleanor nodded, feeling her own tears threatening to spill over. Dr. Chun confirmed it this afternoon. I'm about 6.5 weeks along. The baby is due in early March. William set the photos aside and pulled Eleanor into his arms, holding her tightly against his chest. She could feel his heart beating rapidly, matching the rhythm of her own excited pulse. They sat together in comfortable silence for several minutes, both trying to process the magnitude of the news. I can't believe it, William whispered into her hair. After all this time wondering and hoping it's actually happening. Eleanor pulled back to look at her husband's face. The joy and excitement she saw there helped ease some of her own anxiety about the pregnancy. Are you happy? Truly happy? Eleanor, this is the most wonderful news you could have given me, William said, cupping her face in his hands. You're going to be an amazing mother, and our child is going to be so loved. They spent the evening making quiet plans and talking about their hopes for the baby. William immediately became protective, insisting that Eleanor should reduce her official engagements and get more rest. Eleanor appreciated his concern, but reminded him that they needed to be careful not to change her routine too dramatically before they were ready to make the pregnancy public. We should tell our families first, William said as they prepared for bed that night. My mother will be over the moon, and your parents will want to start planning everything immediately. Eleanor smiled at the thought of her mother's reaction. Lady Catherine Beaumont was known for her organizational skills and attention to detail. The moment she learned about the pregnancy, she would probably start making lists and schedules for everything from nursery decorating to baby clothes shopping. I think we should wait another week or two before telling anyone, Eleanor said carefully. Dr. Chun mentioned that the first trimester can be unpredictable, and I like to make sure everything is progressing normally before we get everyone excited. William nodded in understanding. Whatever you're comfortable with. But I have to admit, keeping this secret is going to be incredibly difficult. I want to tell everyone we meet that my brilliant wife is going to make me a father. Over the next 2 weeks, Eleanor found herself becoming an expert at hiding her pregnancy symptoms. The morning sickness arrived right on schedule, making her early morning official duties particularly challenging. She learned to keep crackers in her desk drawer and to excuse herself from meetings when the nausea became overwhelming. Margaret Foster began to notice small changes in Eleanor's behavior. The Duchess was more tired than usual, often needing to rest between engagements. She had also developed strong reactions to certain smells, particularly coffee and perfume, which made some social gatherings uncomfortable for her. "Your Grace, are you certain you're feeling well?" Margaret asked one morning after Eleanor had to leave a breakfast meeting early due to sudden nausea. "Perhaps you should see Dr. Chun for a checkup." Eleanor managed a weak smile. "I think I might be coming down with something. Nothing serious, just a bit under the weather." Margaret wasn't entirely convinced, but she respected Eleanor's privacy and didn't push the matter further. Instead, she quietly began rearranging Eleanor's schedule to include more breaks and shorter meetings. The most challenging part of keeping the secret was attending formal dinners and social events where alcohol was served. Eleanor had always enjoyed a glass of wine with dinner, and her sudden abstinence was beginning to attract attention from observant guests. During a state dinner honoring the ambassador from France, Lady Victoria Pemberton noticed that Eleanor's wine glass remained untouched throughout the entire meal. "Not drinking tonight, Your Grace?" she asked with a curious smile. The wine selection is supposed to be exceptional. Eleanor felt her cheeks flush as several other guests turned to listen to her response. "I'm taking some medication that doesn't mix well with alcohol," she replied smoothly. "Nothing serious, just a precaution." William, seated beside her, squeezed her hand gently under the table in support. He had been watching her navigate these social situations with admiration for her quick thinking and grace under pressure. As the weeks passed, Eleanor began to show subtle signs of pregnancy that only she and William could detect. Her clothes felt slightly tighter around the waist, and she had developed a small but noticeable curve to her lower abdomen. Standing sideways in front of their bedroom mirror, she could see the beginnings of what would eventually become a prominent baby bump. "Look at this," she said to William one evening, placing his hand on her stomach. "I think the baby is starting to make its presence known." William's face lit up with wonder as he felt the slight roundness beneath his palm. "It's really there, isn't it? Our baby is really growing." Eleanor covered his hand with hers and smiled. "Dr. Chun says everything is progressing perfectly. The baby is developing right on schedule, and the heartbeat is getting stronger." At 8 weeks pregnant, Eleanor had her second appointment with Dr. Chun. This time, William accompanied her to hear the baby's heartbeat for himself. The sound filled the examination room like rapid, rhythmic drums, and both parents listened in amazement. "The heartbeat is much stronger now," Dr. Chun explained as she moved the ultrasound wand around Eleanor's abdomen. "And if you look at the screen, you can see that the baby has grown significantly since your last visit." The tiny figure on the screen was more defined now, with clear head and body sections visible. Eleanor squeezed William's hand as they watched their child, moving slightly within the amniotic sac. "When will we be able to find out the baby's gender?" William asked, his eyes fixed on the monitor. "Usually around 18 to 20 weeks, Dr. Chin replied. "We can schedule another appointment for when you're ready to know, assuming you want to find out before the birth." Eleanor and William exchanged glances. They hadn't discussed whether they wanted to know the baby's gender in advance. "I think we'd like to be surprised," Eleanor said finally. "As long as the baby is healthy, that's all that matters to us." Dr. Chun smiled and printed several new ultrasound photos for them to take home. "The baby is developing beautifully. Your due date looks to be March 8th, assuming you deliver right on time." Of course, babies rarely stick to schedules, so anywhere between late February and mid-March will be normal. On the drive home from the appointment, Eleanor and William discussed the reality of becoming parents in just 7 months. The timeline seemed both impossibly far away and frighteningly close at the same time. "We'll need to start thinking about announcing the pregnancy soon," William said as they passed through the countryside. "People are beginning to notice changes in your behavior and appearance." Eleanor nodded, though the thought of making their private joy public made her nervous. "I'd like to wait until I'm 12 weeks along, like Dr. Chin suggested." That gives us about 4 more weeks to enjoy this secret just between us. And our families? William asked. When should we tell them? Eleanor had been thinking about this question for days. She knew that once they told their parents, word would spread quickly through their inner circle. Royal secrets had a way of becoming public knowledge faster than anyone intended. I think we should tell them next week, she decided. I'll be 9 weeks along by then, and if we're going to announce publicly at 12 weeks, our families deserve some time to prepare. William agreed with her reasoning. My mother is going to cry with happiness, he predicted with a smile. And your father will probably start making plans for the baby's education before it's even born. Eleanor laughed, knowing William was probably right. Her father, Lord James Beaumont, was known for his long-term planning and attention to detail. He would undoubtedly want to discuss everything from the baby's future role in the duchy to the best schools and universities for royal children. That evening, Eleanor called her parents to invite them for dinner at the palace the following Sunday. She was careful to make the invitation sound casual, not wanting to raise suspicions about the purpose of the gathering. How lovely, her mother said over the phone. Is there any special occasion, or just a family dinner? Just a chance to spend some time together, Eleanor replied, hoping her voice sounded normal. William and I don't get to see you nearly often enough with our busy schedules. After hanging up the phone, Eleanor felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness about sharing their news. She knew her parents would be thrilled, but telling them would make the pregnancy feel more real and permanent. There would be no going back after that moment. William was equally nervous about telling his mother, the Dowager Duchess Margaret Ashford. She had been pressuring them about grandchildren since their wedding day, but she had always done so with love and genuine excitement about the prospect of continuing the family line. She's going to want to take over every aspect of the pregnancy, William warned Eleanor, from choosing the nursery colors to interviewing potential nannies. Eleanor smiled at the thought of her mother-in-law's enthusiasm. As long as she lets us make the final decisions, I think having her support will be wonderful. The week passed slowly as Eleanor and William prepared for their family announcements. Eleanor found herself paying more attention to pregnant women she saw during her public appearances, wondering what her own pregnancy would be like as it progressed. She noticed how some women seemed to glow with happiness while others looked tired and uncomfortable. During a visit to a children's hospital, Eleanor spent extra time in the maternity ward, watching new mothers with their babies. The sight of tiny infants sleeping peacefully in their mother's arms filled her with anticipation and a touch of anxiety about what lay ahead. They're so small, she whispered to William as they observed a particularly tiny baby through the nursery window. And perfect, William added, slipping his arm around her waist. I can't wait to hold our baby like that. The head nurse, not knowing about Eleanor's pregnancy, began telling them about the hospital's maternity services and the special care they provided for high-risk pregnancies. Eleanor listened with new interest, storing away information she might need in the months ahead. As Sunday approached, Eleanor found herself rehearsing how she would tell her parents about the baby. She had considered various approaches, from simply announcing the news to showing them the ultrasound photos as a surprise. In the end, she decided to let the conversation flow naturally and reveal the pregnancy when the moment felt right. The morning of the family dinner, Eleanor woke up feeling more nauseated than usual. The morning sickness seemed to be getting worse rather than better as she progressed through her 9th week of pregnancy. She managed to keep down some toast and ginger tea, but the thought of cooking smells made her stomach churn. William found her sitting in their bedroom, looking pale and tired. Are you going to be able to handle dinner with your parents tonight? He asked with concern. Eleanor took a deep breath and nodded. I think the nausea might actually help convince them that something important is happening. It will be hard to hide how I'm feeling during a long dinner. That afternoon, Eleanor chose her outfit carefully. She selected a flowing emerald green dress that would hide her slightly rounded abdomen while still looking elegant and appropriate for a family dinner. Looking in the mirror, she practiced smiling and tried to imagine her parents' faces when they learned they were going to be grandparents. The time had come to share their wonderful secret with the people they loved most. Lord James Beaumont and Lady Catherine arrived at Ashford Palace precisely at 6 o'clock, just as Eleanor had expected. Her father was a man who believed punctuality was a virtue, and her mother never kept anyone waiting. Eleanor watched from the drawing-room window as their car pulled through the main gates, her stomach fluttering with nervous excitement. William joined her at the window, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Are you ready for this?" he asked gently. Eleanor nodded, though she felt far from ready. "I keep imagining their faces when we tell them. Mother's going to start crying, and Father will probably start making lists of things we need to do." They walked together to the main entrance hall, where Eleanor's parents were being greeted by the palace staff. Lady Catherine embraced her daughter warmly, then stepped back to study her face with the keen eye of a mother who knew her child well. "You look different, darling," she said thoughtfully. "There's something about your complexion. Are you using a new skincare routine?" Eleanor felt her cheeks flush. "Nothing new, Mother. Perhaps it's just the lighting in here." Lord James kissed his daughter's cheek and shook William's hand firmly. "Good to see you both. I hope you don't mind, but I brought some documents about the new hospital wing project. I thought we might discuss the budget allocations over dinner." "Actually, Father, we hope we might keep tonight's conversation more personal," Eleanor said carefully. "We have some family news we'd like to share." Both parents exchanged curious glances. Lady Catherine's eyebrows rose slightly, and Eleanor could practically see her mother's mind racing through possibilities. They moved to the private family dining room, where the table had been set for four with Eleanor's favorite china and crystal. The room was smaller and more intimate than the formal state dining room, perfect for personal conversations. William had arranged for a special menu of Eleanor's current favorite foods, carefully avoiding anything that might trigger her morning sickness. During the first course, Eleanor found herself picking at her soup while her parents chatted about recent social events and family friends. Every few minutes, her mother would glance at her with growing concern. "Eleanor, you're barely eating," Lady Catherine observed. "Are you feeling well? You seem quite pale tonight." Eleanor exchanged a meaningful look with William, who nodded encouragingly. The moment had arrived sooner than they had planned, but perhaps it was better to address her mother's concerns directly. "Actually, Mother, there's a reason I haven't been feeling quite myself lately," Eleanor began, setting down her spoon with hands that trembled slightly. "William, and I have some wonderful news to share with you." The table fell silent. Lord James stopped eating and looked up with interest, while Lady Catherine leaned forward her chair, her eyes bright with anticipation. Eleanor reached into her purse and pulled out the latest ultrasound photos, placing them carefully on the table between her parents. "You're going to be grandparents." For a moment, nobody spoke. Lady Catherine stared at the ultrasound images, her mouth opening and closing without sound. Lord James picked up one of the photos and examined it closely, adjusting his reading glasses to see better. This is our grandchild," Lady Catherine whispered, touching the photo with gentle fingers. "Yes," Eleanor said, feeling tears start to form in her eyes. "I'm 9 weeks pregnant. The baby is due in early March." Lady Catherine burst into tears of joy, jumping up from her chair to embrace her daughter. "Oh, darling, this is the most wonderful news. I'm so happy I could burst." Lord James stood up more slowly, but his smile was just as bright as his wife's tears. He pulled William into a warm handshake that turned into a hug. "Congratulations, son. This is extraordinary news." "How long have you known?" Lady Catherine asked, dabbing at her eyes with her napkin while still studying the ultrasound photos. "And how are you feeling? Are you getting enough rest? Do you need anything?" Eleanor laughed at her mother's immediate shift into protective mode. "We found out about 3 weeks ago, and I'm feeling well, just tired and a bit nauseated in the mornings. Dr. Chun says everything is progressing perfectly." "Dr. Chun knows?" Lord James asked. "Good. She's excellent. Has she given you any special instructions? What about your official duties? Will you need to reduce your schedule?" William had been right about Lord James making plans immediately. Eleanor could see her father's mind already working through the practical implications of the pregnancy. "We're planning to announce the pregnancy publicly when I reach 12 weeks," Eleanor explained. That gives us about 3 more weeks to prepare. We wanted to tell family first, so you could get used to the idea before it becomes public knowledge. Lady Catherine was still staring at the ultrasound photos in wonder. Look at this tiny little person. I can actually see the head and body. It's really a baby, James. We're really going to be grandparents. The dinner continued with much more animated conversation as Eleanor's parents asked dozens of questions about her health, her doctor's appointments, and their plans for the baby. Lady Catherine immediately began discussing nursery decorations and baby clothes, while Lord James wanted to know about security arrangements and staff adjustments. Have you thought about names? Lady Catherine asked over dessert. There are such lovely family names on both sides that would be perfect for the baby. Eleanor and William exchanged glances. They had started to discuss names, but hadn't made any decisions yet. We've talked about it a little, Eleanor said diplomatically. But we have plenty of time to decide. Of course you do, Lady Catherine agreed. But it's never too early to start considering options. Your great-grandmother Eleanor was such a wonderful woman, and William's family has that lovely tradition of names beginning with M for the girls. Lord James was more focused on practical matters. We'll need to discuss security arrangements well before the birth. Royal babies require special protection, and the palace will need to be prepared for increased media attention. William nodded seriously. We've already begun preliminary discussions with the security team. Nothing formal yet, but we want to ensure Eleanor's privacy and safety throughout the pregnancy. After dinner, they moved to the sitting room, where Eleanor's parents continued to ask questions and make suggestions. Lady Catherine had already mentally begun planning baby showers and shopping trips, while Lord James discussed the legal requirements for documenting the birth of a potential heir to the duchy. When will you tell William's mother? Lady Catherine asked. Margaret is going to be absolutely thrilled. Tomorrow evening, William replied. We're having dinner with her then. I expect she'll react much the same way you have. Eleanor smiled at the thought of her mother-in-law's excitement. The Dowager Duchess had been dropping hints about grandchildren since Eleanor and William's engagement, always with love, but with increasing frequency as time passed. As the evening wound down, Lady Catherine became emotional again while saying goodbye. I still can't quite believe it, she said, hugging Eleanor tightly. My little girl is going to be a mother herself. You'll be a wonderful grandmother, Eleanor assured her. This baby is going to be so lucky to have you and father. Lord James shook William's hand again and clapped him on the shoulder. Take good care of her, son. Pregnancy can be demanding, and Eleanor will need extra support in the coming months. After her parents left, Eleanor and William sat together in their private sitting room, reflecting on the evening's events. That went better than I expected, Eleanor said, curling up beside William on the sofa. I was worried they might be overwhelmed or concerned about the timing. They were perfect, William agreed, though I suspect we're going to be getting daily phone calls from your mother with questions and suggestions. Eleanor laughed. Probably, but I'm glad they know. Keeping the secret was getting harder every day, especially for Mother. She notices everything. The next evening, William's mother arrived at the palace for their scheduled dinner. The Dowager Duchess Margaret was an elegant woman in her early 60s who had raised William with a perfect balance of royal duty and maternal love. She had been widowed for 8 years and had devoted herself to charitable work and supporting her son's role as Duke. Eleanor felt more nervous about telling Margaret than she had about her own parents. The Dowager Duchess had high expectations and strong opinions about royal traditions and proper behavior. Eleanor wondered how she would react to becoming a grandmother. They gathered in the same family dining room where they had hosted Eleanor's parents the night before. Margaret noticed the ultrasound photos that Eleanor had deliberately left on the side table, but she didn't comment on them immediately. You both seem particularly happy tonight, Margaret observed during the main course. Has something wonderful happened? William looked at Eleanor, who nodded with encouragement. Actually, Mother, we have some news that we hope will make you very happy. Margaret set down her fork and gave them her full attention. Oh, what sort of news? William reached for the ultrasound photos and handed them to his mother. "You're going to be a grandmother, Mother. Eleanor is pregnant." Margaret stared at the photos for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Eleanor held her breath, waiting for her mother-in-law's reaction. Finally, Margaret looked up with tears glistening in her eyes and the brightest smile Eleanor had ever seen from her. "Oh, my dears," she said softly, "this is the most wonderful gift you could have given me. A grandchild. I had hoped and prayed for this day." She stood up and came around the table to embrace both Eleanor and William. "How far along are you, dear? And how are you feeling? You must tell me everything." Eleanor felt a wave of relief wash over her. Margaret's reaction was even warmer than she had dared to hope. "I'm 9 weeks along, and feeling well despite some morning sickness. Dr. Chun says everything is progressing normally." Margaret returned to her seat but kept the ultrasound photos in her hands, studying them with fascination. "Look at this precious little one. I can hardly believe it. After all these years of hoping, it's really happening. We wanted to tell you before we make any public announcements," William explained. "We value your advice and support, especially as Eleanor navigates royal pregnancy protocols." Margaret's expression became more serious as she considered the practical implications. "Yes, we'll need to be very careful about managing the public aspects of this pregnancy. The media attention will be intense, and Eleanor's privacy and comfort must be protected." They spent the rest of the evening discussing Margaret's own pregnancy experience and her advice for handling the unique challenges of being pregnant while fulfilling royal duties. Margaret shared stories about William's infancy and her memories of preparing for motherhood while under public scrutiny. "The most important thing," Margaret told Eleanor as they said goodnight, "is to remember that this is your pregnancy and your baby. Listen to advice, but trust your own instincts. You're going to be a wonderful mother." With both families now aware of the pregnancy, Eleanor felt as though a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She no longer had to carefully monitor her words and behavior around her loved ones. The support and excitement from both families gave her confidence about the journey ahead. As she and William prepared for bed that night, Eleanor reflected on how much her life had changed in just a few short weeks. Soon, they would share their news with the world, and their private joy would become public celebration. 3 weeks later, Eleanor sat in her private study reviewing the press statement that would announce her pregnancy to the world. At 12 weeks along, she had reached the milestone Dr. Chun recommended for making the news public. Her morning sickness had finally begun to subside, though she still felt tired more easily than before. The official announcement had been carefully crafted by the palace communications team in consultation with Eleanor, William, and their families. It struck the right tone of joy and gratitude while maintaining the dignity expected of royal communications. "Their Graces, the Duke and Duchess of Ashford, are delighted to announce that the Duchess is expecting their first child," Eleanor read aloud to William. "The baby is due in early spring, and both mother and child are in excellent health. Their Graces request privacy during this special time as they prepare to welcome their new family member." William nodded approvingly. "It sounds perfect. Not too much information, but enough to satisfy the public's curiosity." Eleanor's hand moved instinctively to her growing abdomen. At 12 weeks, her pregnancy was becoming more noticeable to her, though she could still hide the changes with carefully chosen clothing. Soon, that would no longer be possible. The press statement was scheduled to be released at noon the following day, giving the palace staff time to prepare for the expected media attention. Eleanor's private secretary had already fielded dozens of requests for interviews and photo opportunities, all of which had been politely declined pending the official announcement. Margaret Foster knocked on the study door and entered with a warm smile. "Your Grace, the photographer from the Royal Portrait Studio has arrived for your official pregnancy photos." Eleanor had agreed to have professional photographs taken that could be released to the media alongside the pregnancy announcement. She hoped that providing high-quality images would reduce the paparazzi's motivation to chase her for candid shots in the coming months. The photography session took place in the palace's morning room, where natural light streamed through tall windows overlooking the gardens. Eleanor wore a flowing blue dress that elegantly showed her small, but growing bump for the first time in any official capacity. "Perfect," the photographer said as Eleanor posed with one hand resting gently on her abdomen. "The light is beautiful, and you look radiant, Your Grace." William joined her for several couple shots, his hand covering hers on her belly as they both smiled genuinely for the camera. These were the images that would announce their baby to the world, and Eleanor wanted them to reflect the joy and love they felt. That evening, Eleanor experienced her first real pregnancy scare. She was getting ready for bed when she noticed some light spotting. Panic immediately filled her chest as she called for William, who was in his adjacent dressing room. "William, something's wrong," she said, her voice tight with fear. "I think something might be happening to the baby." William took one look at her frightened expression and immediately called Dr. Chen's emergency line. Within 30 minutes, they were at the medical center for an urgent ultrasound. Eleanor lay on the examination table, gripping William's hand tightly as Dr. Chen prepared the ultrasound machine. The wait for the image to appear on screen felt like an eternity. "There's the heartbeat," Dr. Chen said with relief evident in her voice. "Strong and steady. The baby looks perfectly fine." Eleanor started crying with relief as she watched their baby moving actively on the screen. The tiny figure was much larger now than in previous scans, with clearly defined features beginning to develop. "The spotting is completely normal at this stage," Dr. Chen explained. "It's called implantation bleeding, and it happens to many women around 12 weeks. As long as it's light and doesn't include cramping, there's nothing to worry about." Eleanor nodded, still emotional from the scare. "I was terrified that we might lose the baby just as we're about to announce the pregnancy." "The baby is developing beautifully," Dr. Chen reassured them. "All the measurements are perfect for 12 weeks, and everything looks exactly as it should." On the drive home, Eleanor felt drained from the emotional roller coaster of the evening. "I don't think I realized how much I already love this baby until I thought something might be wrong." William squeezed her hand. "We're going to be such protective parents. This little one is already so precious to us." The next morning arrived with unusual chaos at Ashford Palace. The communications team had assembled early to manage the press release and handle the expected flood of media inquiries. Eleanor's social media accounts had been prepared with the official announcement post, and security had been increased around the palace grounds. At exactly noon, the pregnancy announcement was released to the press. Within minutes, Eleanor's phone began buzzing with congratulatory messages from friends, extended family members, and colleagues from various charitable organizations. The palace switchboard lit up with calls from media outlets around the world requesting interviews and comments. Television news programs interrupted their regular programming to announce the royal pregnancy, showing the official photographs and speculating about everything from the baby's gender to potential names. Eleanor watched the news coverage from her private sitting room, amazed at how quickly their personal joy had become international news. Every major network seemed to have royal correspondents discussing the significance of the pregnancy for the duchy's succession and the public's reaction to the announcement. "Look at this," William said, showing her his tablet. The palace's official social media post already has hundreds of thousands of likes and thousands of comments from well-wishers around the world. Eleanor scrolled through some of the public comments, touched by the genuine excitement and kind words from complete strangers. People were sharing their own pregnancy stories, offering advice, and expressing hopes for the baby's health and happiness. Lady Catherine called within hours of the announcement, practically bursting with excitement about the public response. "Darling, I've been watching the news all afternoon. Everyone is so thrilled for you and William. The florist has already called to ask about pregnancy celebration arrangements." Eleanor laughed at her mother's enthusiasm. "Mother, please don't let this become too overwhelming. William, and I want to enjoy the pregnancy without it turning into a public spectacle." "Of course, dear. But surely you'll want to do something special to celebrate with close friends and family?" Perhaps a small garden party when the weather improves. Eleanor agreed that some kind of celebration would be appropriate, though she insisted it be kept small and intimate. The last thing she wanted was for her pregnancy to become a series of public events that took away from the personal joy of expecting their first child. Over the following weeks, Eleanor's pregnancy became more visible as she entered her second trimester. The morning sickness had largely disappeared, replaced by increased energy and an appetite that made up for the weeks when she could barely keep food down. Her official duties required some adjustments as her body changed. She could no longer stand for long periods during ceremonial events, and her staff arranged for chairs to be discreetly placed wherever she might need to rest. Margaret Foster became expert at reading Eleanor's energy levels and suggesting breaks before the Duchess became too tired. The media attention was constant, but generally positive. Photographers waited outside every venue Eleanor visited, hoping to capture photos of her growing bump. Fashion magazines analyzed her maternity style choices, praising her elegant approach to dressing her changing body. Eleanor found some aspects of the attention flattering and others invasive. She appreciated the public's genuine excitement about the baby, but she sometimes felt like her body had become public property. Every outfit choice was scrutinized. Every public appearance was analyzed for clues about her health and the baby's development. I feel like I can't even scratch my nose without someone speculating about what it means for the pregnancy. Eleanor complained to William after a particularly intense day of public appearances. William sympathized with her frustration. Maybe we should reduce your schedule even further. The most important thing is your well-being and the baby's health. Eleanor considered his suggestion, but ultimately decided to continue most of her regular duties. I don't want to hide away for the entire pregnancy. I want to show that pregnant women can continue working and contributing to society. At 16 weeks pregnant, Eleanor had another milestone appointment with Dr. Chen. This time, they would find out if they wanted to learn the baby's gender. Eleanor and William had decided they preferred to be surprised, but the technology was available if they changed their minds. The ultrasound showed remarkable development since their last visit. The baby was now clearly recognizable as a human infant, with defined facial features, fully formed limbs, and active movements that Eleanor was just beginning to feel. Everything looks perfect, Dr. Chen reported. The baby is measuring exactly right for 16 weeks, and all the organ development is proceeding normally. Are you sure you don't want to know if it's a boy or girl? Eleanor and William looked at each other and smiled. We're sure, Eleanor said. We want to be surprised when the baby arrives. Have you been feeling the baby move yet? Dr. Chen asked as she continued the examination. I think so, Eleanor replied. Sometimes I feel little fluttering sensations, but I wasn't sure if that was the baby or just my imagination. That's exactly what early fetal movement feels like. Over the next few weeks, the movements will become stronger and more obvious. By 20 weeks, other people might be able to feel the baby kick from the outside. Eleanor found the idea of sharing the baby's movements with William exciting and slightly overwhelming. The pregnancy was becoming more real and tangible every day, making the reality of becoming parents feel both more exciting and more daunting. That evening, as Eleanor and William sat together reading in their private sitting room, she felt a distinct fluttering movement in her lower abdomen. William, she said softly, placing her hand over the spot. I think the baby just moved. William immediately set aside his book and moved closer to her on the sofa. Eleanor guided his hand to the right place, and they waited quietly for several minutes. Just as William was beginning to think he had missed it, there was another gentle flutter beneath his palm. Did you feel that? Eleanor whispered. William's face broke into a huge smile. I did. That was really the baby. Eleanor nodded, tears forming in her eyes at the magic of the moment. That's our child, William. Our baby is really there, growing and moving around. They spent the rest of the evening with William's hand on Eleanor's belly, waiting for more movements and marveling at the miracle developing inside her. The pregnancy had reached a new level of reality, and they both felt more connected to their unborn child than ever before. As Eleanor prepared for bed that night, she looked at herself in the full-length mirror and smiled at her reflection. Her body was changing rapidly now, and soon there would be no hiding her pregnancy from anyone. But for the first time since learning about the baby, she felt completely ready for whatever came next. At 28 weeks pregnant, Eleanor's condition could no longer be hidden by even the most carefully chosen outfits. Her growing belly had become a beautiful, prominent curve that announced her pregnancy to anyone who saw her. The baby's movements were now strong enough that William could feel kicks and rolls whenever he placed his hand on her stomach. The nursery preparations had begun in earnest, though Eleanor and William had chosen to keep the details private until after the birth. They had selected a neutral color scheme of soft yellows and greens, with hand-painted murals of woodland animals decorating the walls. The antique crib that had been used by generations of Ashford children was being carefully restored by palace craftsmen. Eleanor's official duties had been significantly reduced as her pregnancy progressed, but she continued to make important appearances and maintain her charitable work. Her maternity wardrobe had evolved into an elegant collection of flowing dresses and tailored coats that accommodated her changing figure while maintaining her sophisticated style. The public's fascination with the royal pregnancy had not diminished. Every public appearance generated extensive media coverage, with photographers capturing countless images of Eleanor's growing bump. Fashion magazines featured regular updates on her maternity style, and parenting experts offered commentary on her approach to pregnancy in the public eye. During a visit to a children's hospital, Eleanor spent extra time in the maternity ward, observing new mothers and their babies with new understanding. The tiny infants sleeping peacefully in their cribs filled her with anticipation for her own baby's arrival. "They're so perfect," she murmured to William as they watched through the nursery window. "In just a few months, we'll have our own little one to hold." Dr. Sarah Patterson, the head of pediatrics, joined them at the observation window. "Babies born here receive excellent care, Your Grace. We're honored that you've chosen to spotlight our maternity services with your visit." Eleanor smiled warmly. "The work you do here is invaluable. Every family deserves access to quality care during such an important time." The conversation turned to Eleanor's own pregnancy plans. She and William had decided to deliver their baby at a private wing of the Royal Medical Center, where security and privacy could be maintained while ensuring access to the best possible medical care. "Dr. Chun speaks very highly of your pregnancy progress," Dr. Patterson commented. "Everything proceeding smoothly?" "Wonderfully well," Eleanor replied, placing her hand on her belly as the baby gave a particularly strong kick. "This little one is very active and seems to be developing perfectly." As if responding to the conversation, the baby kicked again, hard enough that both doctors could see the movement through Eleanor's dress. Everyone laughed at the timing, and Eleanor felt a surge of love for the active little person growing inside her. The drive back to Ashford Palace took them through the countryside that would one day belong to their child. Eleanor looked out at the rolling hills and ancient oak trees, imagining teaching her son or daughter about their heritage and responsibilities to the land and people of Ashford. "Do you think we're ready to be parents?" Eleanor asked William as they passed through a small village where people had gathered to wave at their car. William considered the question seriously. "I don't think anyone is ever completely ready, but I know we love this baby already, and we'll figure out the rest as we go." Eleanor nodded, comforted by his confidence. The baby kicked again, and she rubbed the spot gently. "You're right. Love is the most important foundation." That evening, Eleanor's parents visited for dinner to discuss the final preparations for the baby's arrival. Lady Catherine had prepared extensive lists of everything from essential baby items to potential godparents for the christening ceremony. "Have you given any more thought to names?" Lady Catherine asked as they enjoyed dessert in the family dining room. "There are such lovely options in both family trees." Eleanor and William had been discussing names for months, but hadn't made final decisions. "We have some favorites," Eleanor said diplomatically. but we want to see the baby before we make the final choice. Lord James was more focused on practical preparations. The security arrangements for the birth have been finalized, I assume, and the succession documentation. William nodded. Everything has been arranged. The legal requirements will be handled immediately after the birth, and security protocols have been established for the hospital and the journey there. As they talked, Eleanor felt a series of strong movements from the baby. The little one seemed to be responding to the animated conversation about their future. She placed her hand on the most active spot and was rewarded with what felt like a tiny hand or foot pressing back against her palm. "The baby is being quite active tonight," she announced to the table. "Would you like to feel?" Lady Catherine immediately came around the table to place her hand where Eleanor indicated. Her face lit up with wonder as she felt her grandchild moving beneath her touch. "Oh my goodness," she breathed. "That's really the baby. James, you must feel this." Lord James, typically more reserved in his emotions, was visibly moved when he felt his grandchild's movements. "Remarkable," he said quietly. "Simply remarkable." The evening concluded with plans for Lady Catherine to stay at the palace for the final weeks before the birth. Eleanor appreciated having her mother's support and experience nearby as the delivery date approached. At 32 weeks, Eleanor had what she and William privately called the great naming discussion. They had narrowed their choices down to a few favorites for both boys and girls, but making final decisions proved more challenging than they had anticipated. "If it's a boy, I love the name Alexander," Eleanor said as they sat in the nursery, surrounded by baby clothes and toys that had been arriving as gifts from well-wishers around the world. "Alexander Ashford." William tested the sound. "I like it. Strong, but not too formal. And we could call him Alex for short." "And for a girl?" Eleanor asked, folding a tiny pink dress that had been hand-embroidered by a local craftsperson. "I keep coming back to Victoria," William admitted. "It honors your great-grandmother, and it has such dignity." Eleanor smiled. "Victoria Eleanora's It sounds perfect." They agreed to keep their final choices private until the birth, wanting to preserve at least one surprise for themselves amid all the public attention surrounding the pregnancy. As Eleanor entered her 36th week, her energy levels dropped significantly. The baby had grown large enough to make sleeping difficult, and simple tasks like climbing stairs left her breathless. Dr. Chen assured them that everything was normal for a woman carrying a healthy, full-term baby. The baby could arrive any time now, Dr. Chen explained during Eleanor's weekly appointment. "First babies often come a bit late, but we want to be prepared for an earlier arrival." Eleanor's hospital bag had been packed for weeks, containing carefully chosen outfits for leaving the hospital and meeting the public with their new baby. The palace communications team had prepared multiple versions of the birth announcement, ready to be customized with the baby's gender, name, and birth details. William had arranged to clear his schedule completely for the final weeks of pregnancy, staying close to Eleanor at all times in case labor began suddenly. They had practiced the route to the hospital and timed the journey under various traffic conditions. The media attention reached fever pitch as Eleanor's due date approached. Photographers maintained constant vigils outside the palace gates and the hospital, hoping to capture the first images of the couple departing for the birth. The public's excitement was palpable, with betting pools established about everything from the baby's gender to the exact time of birth. Eleanor found the intensity overwhelming at times, but she tried to focus on the positive aspects of the public's interest in their family. "People are genuinely excited to welcome our baby," she told William one evening as they watched news coverage of the pregnancy on television. "That's actually quite touching." At 38 weeks and 3 days, Eleanor woke up at 3 in the morning with what she initially thought was indigestion. The discomfort came in waves, lasting about 30 seconds each time before subsiding completely. After an hour of timing the sensations, Eleanor gently shook William awake. "I think this might be it," she whispered. "I've been having contractions for about an hour." William was instantly alert, though he tried to remain calm as they had practiced. They called Dr. Chun, who instructed them to monitor the contractions for another hour before heading to the hospital. By 6 in the morning, the contractions were coming every 5 minutes and lasting longer. Eleanor could no longer doubt that labor had begun. "Are you ready to meet our baby?" William asked as he helped Eleanor into the car for the journey to the hospital. Eleanor nodded, feeling nervous and excited in equal measure. "I can't believe it's finally happening. After all these months of waiting and wondering, we're going to meet our child today." The drive to the hospital was surreal, with security vehicles clearing their path and media helicopters following overhead. Eleanor focused on her breathing exercises while William held her hand and offered encouragement between contractions. At the hospital, they were escorted quickly through a private entrance to the prepared birthing suite. Dr. Chun was already waiting with a full medical team, all of whom Eleanor had met during the pregnancy planning process. "How are you feeling, Your Grace?" Dr. Chun asked as Eleanor settled into the comfortable birthing room. Nervous, excited, and ready to finally hold this baby, Eleanor replied honestly, squeezing William's hand as another contraction peaked. The labor progressed steadily throughout the day. Eleanor's parents and mother-in-law waited in a private family room, while the palace communications team prepared to announce the birth to the waiting world. At 6:24 in the evening, after nearly 16 hours of labor, Eleanor and William's baby arrived with a healthy cry that filled the room with joy. "Congratulations, Dr. Chun announced with a huge smile. "You have a beautiful daughter." Eleanor looked down at the tiny, perfect baby girl placed on her chest and felt her heart expand with a love she had never imagined possible. The baby had dark hair like William's and was looking around with bright, alert eyes. "Hello, little Victoria," Eleanor whispered, touching her daughter's soft cheek. "We've been waiting so long to meet you." William leaned over both of them, tears of joy streaming down his face. "She's absolutely perfect, Eleanor. Look at her beautiful little hands." Princess Victoria Eleanor Ashford weighed 7 pounds, 2 ounces, and measured 19 inches long. She was pronounced completely healthy and was soon nursing contentedly in her mother's arms. As the sun set over Ashford Palace, news of the princess's birth spread around the world. Church bells rang throughout the duchy, and crowds gathered outside the palace gates to celebrate the arrival of the newest member of the royal family. Eleanor held her daughter close and marveled at how perfectly she fit in her arms. The pregnancy journey that had begun with a secret had culminated in the most beautiful public joy she had ever experienced. "Welcome to the world, Princess Victoria," she murmured as her daughter slept peacefully. "Your story is just beginning."